They mocked him, ridiculed him, and labeled him with accusations meant to damage his credibility, yet he did not alter the message to please them. He did not dilute its principles to gain acceptance. When they offered him wealth beyond imagination, leadership over Makkah, and every worldly incentive that could tempt a human heart, he refused with clarity and firmness. His loyalty was not to status or comfort, it was to the command of Allah. Even when persecution escalated into physical harm and social boycott, his mission did not waver. The valley of Abu Talib became a place of hunger and hardship, yet his call continued. He witnessed companions tortured, some martyred, yet he remained patient, guiding them with hope and reminding them of a promise far greater than worldly relief. When stones struck his blessed body in Taif and blood flowed from his wounds, his commitment was not shaken by pain. Instead of retreating from his mission, he turned to Allah in supplication, reaffirming his dedication to the very task that had brought him suffering. His life became a living testament that when a heart is anchored to divine purpose, no storm can uproot it, no temptation can distract it, and no hardship can silence it. Personal sacrifice over comfort was not an occasional choice in his life. It was a consistent pattern that defined his character. At a time when he had the opportunity to live with privilege and honor among his people, he chose a path filled with strain and uncertainty. Before prophethood, he was already known as Al-Amin, the trustworthy one, respected and admired. He could have continued living in peace, enjoying the stability of trade, family life, and social standing, but once the message was entrusted to him, comfort became secondary to obedience. The ease he once knew was replaced with nights of reflection, days of calling to truth, and moments of deep concern for the guidance of others. His home life reflected this sacrifice in the most intimate ways. There were periods when months passed without a cooked meal in his household. Dates and water were often the only sustenance available, not because provisions were unattainable, but because simplicity was chosen over indulgence. Even when wealth later flowed into Medina and the Muslim community began to grow in strength, his personal lifestyle did not change. He slept on a simple mat that left marks on his blessed body. He mended his own clothes and repaired his own sandals. He sat among his companions as one of them, never seeking distinction in posture or privilege. Comfort was available, yet he consistently turned away from excess, teaching through action that attachment to this world dims the light of the hereafter. The emotional sacrifice was just as profound as the physical. He carried the weight of his community's struggles in his heart. He would stand in prayer at night until his feet swelled, not out of obligation alone, but out of gratitude and devotion. When asked why he exerted himself so much despite being forgiven, his response reflected a heart that found sweetness in sacrifice. His tears were shed not for worldly loss, but for the salvation of humanity. Even in moments when rest would have been understandable, he rose to serve, to advise, to reconcile, and to comfort. He bore insults with patience, hunger with gratitude, and exhaustion with dignity, consistently choosing the pleasure of Allah over the fleeting ease of worldly life. Patience in the face of rejection was one of the most striking qualities displayed throughout his mission. From the earliest days of public proclamation, he encountered resistance not from strangers alone, but from his own tribe, his own relatives, and those who had once praised his integrity. The very people who called him truthful began to question his sanity. They mocked the revelation, scoffed at the message of resurrection, and turned away when verses were recited. Yet his response was never fueled by bitterness. He did not allow rejection to harden his heart or alter his character. Instead, it deepened his reliance upon Allah and strengthened his resolve to continue conveying the truth with clarity and compassion. The rejection was not merely verbal, it escalated into social isolation and public humiliation. He would walk through the streets of Makkah while insults followed him. Dust was thrown upon him as he prayed. He endured the pain of seeing companions tortured for embracing the message he brought. Each incident could have justified anger or retaliation, yet he chose restraint. His patience was not passive acceptance, it was controlled strength. It was the ability to remain dignified while facing cruelty, to maintain gentleness while surrounded by hostility. He continued inviting people privately and publicly, repeating the call with wisdom, never responding to ignorance with ignorance. One of the most painful moments of rejection occurred in Taif, where he traveled seeking support after years of hardship in Mecca. Instead of finding allies, he faced ridicule and physical assault. Children were incited to throw stones at him until blood flowed from his body. Exhausted and wounded, he sought refuge in an orchard, turning not to revenge but to supplication. His prayer reflected vulnerability before Allah, not complaint against the people. Even when offered the chance for divine retribution against those who harmed him, he refused, expressing hope that future generations might believe. That hope, despite visible rejection, demonstrated a patience rooted in vision beyond the immediate moment. His endurance was not based on human approval, but on certainty in divine wisdom, allowing him to persist through years of denial, betrayal, and mockery without abandoning the mission entrusted to him. Compassion even toward enemies was not a strategic gesture in his life. It was a deeply rooted principle that shaped his reactions in moments where most would choose retaliation. He faced individuals who slandered him, plotted against him, physically harmed him, and sought to extinguish the message he carried. Yet his response consistently reflected mercy rather than vengeance. This compassion did not arise from weakness or inability to respond. Rather, it flowed from strength of character and certainty in divine justice. He understood that guidance rests in the hands of Allah, and that hearts can change, even those hardened by hatred. In Makkah, he endured relentless hostility from leaders who mocked revelation and incited others against him. They spread rumors, attempted character assassination, and encouraged social and economic boycotts. Despite this, he continued to greet them with dignity and civility. When he passed by gatherings where he was ridiculed, he did not curse or insult in return. His patience was accompanied by a sincere desire for their transformation. He recognized that many who opposed him were driven by pride, fear of change, or blind loyalty to tradition. Rather than condemning them as irredeemable, he saw potential in them, a possibility that one day their hearts might soften. His compassion became even more evident during moments of power. When he eventually returned to Makkah with strength and support, the same individuals who once persecuted him stood vulnerable before him. Years of abuse could have justified severe punishment by any worldly standard, yet he chose forgiveness. He addressed them not with humiliation but with reassurance, declaring freedom where revenge might have been expected. This act was not only political wisdom, it was moral excellence. It dismantled barriers of resentment and opened the doors for many hearts to embrace the very message they once fought against. Even on the battlefield, his compassion set clear limits. He instructed his followers not to harm non-combatants, not to destroy crops or places of worship, and not to mutilate bodies. His concern extended beyond immediate victory to ethical conduct. When individuals who had harmed him personally later sought pardon, he granted it generously. His mercy transformed enemies into loyal companions, illustrating that compassion can achieve what force never could. Through every insult endured and every opportunity for retaliation restrained, he demonstrated that true strength lies not in overpowering others, but in mastering the self and choosing mercy when anger would be easier. Leadership through humility was one of the most defining qualities of his character, setting him apart from every ruler, reformer, or leader the world had known. Despite being entrusted with the greatest mission ever given to a human being, he never allowed authority to elevate him above others. As the community grew and his influence expanded, his humility only deepened. He did not surround himself with symbols of power or demand special treatment. Instead, He lived among the people as one of them, sharing their struggles, listening to their concerns, and walking beside them rather than ahead of them. His leadership was not enforced through fear, but inspired through example. He sat on the ground with the poor, ate simple food with his companions, and responded personally to those who sought his help. When a stranger entered a gathering, it was often impossible to distinguish him from others because he did not occupy a throne or elevated seat. He disliked being praised excessively and redirected admiration toward gratitude to Allah. When companions stood for him out of respect, he discouraged it, teaching them that honor belongs to humility, not status. Even as a leader of a rapidly growing community, he performed household chores, assisted his family, and never viewed service as beneath him. His authority was balanced by approachability, making him accessible to children, women, the elderly, and the marginalized. In moments of decision-making, his humility manifested in consultation. Though he received divine guidance, he still sought the opinions of his companions, valuing their perspectives and experiences. He listened attentively, accepted advice, and at times adopted suggestions that differed from his own initial view. This practice cultivated confidence and unity within the community, demonstrating that leadership is strengthened, not weakened, by inclusivity. When mistakes occurred, he did not shift blame or assert dominance. Instead, he addressed matters gently, correcting without humiliating and guiding without shaming. Even at the height of victory, humility remained his defining trait. When Makkah was conquered, he entered the city with his head lowered in gratitude, not raised in pride. Surrounded by followers and power, he remained conscious of his dependence upon Allah. His humility preserved the purity of his leadership, ensuring that authority never corrupted his purpose. By placing service above self and responsibility above recognition, he redefined leadership as an act of devotion rather than dominance, showing that true greatness is measured not by how many follow you, but by how sincerely you serve those entrusted to you. The legacy of selflessness in his life was unparalleled, shaping not only the community he led, but the course of human history. Every action, every decision, and every moment of his life was infused with concern for others, even when it required him to endure hardship, discomfort, or personal loss. From the earliest days of his mission, he placed the welfare of his companions, his family, and the wider community above his own needs. He never sought personal gain or recognition, and when offered ease or comfort, he consistently chose the path that would benefit others and fulfill the trust placed upon him by Allah. His life was a continuous lesson in prioritizing others over oneself, demonstrating that true leadership and devotion are inseparable from selflessness. Even in his daily routine, the signs of selflessness were evident. While he had the ability to command attention and service, he preferred simplicity. Meals were often modest, and he would eat only what was necessary, frequently giving precedence to guests and companions over himself. He mended his own clothing and cared for his household without complaint. His time was devoted to guiding the people, teaching, reconciling disputes, and offering counsel. The burdens he carried were immense, emotional, social, and spiritual, but he bore them with patience, ensuring that the needs of the community came before his own. He never allowed personal comfort or desire to interfere with the obligations he felt toward those he served, whether they were children, elders, the oppressed, or the marginalized. This selflessness extended to moments of immense sacrifice. During battles, he shared the hardships of his companions, often going without food while ensuring others were fed. When resources were scarce, he would prioritize the vulnerable and needy. In times of social turmoil, when opposition sought to harm him and his followers, he consistently acted to prevent unnecessary suffering. His concern was not limited to his immediate circle. He envisioned a society where justice, compassion, and guidance would reach every individual, often placing himself in situations of personal risk to safeguard others. Even after the conquest of Makkah, when he had the authority to impose retribution, he chose forgiveness, restraint, and the welfare of the people over revenge, demonstrating that selflessness, is not only about material sacrifice, but also moral and spiritual consideration for others. His legacy of selflessness continues to inspire generations because it transcended circumstances.